even though they placed the tombstone.
It didn't look like a close game from the net worth chart, but it was a really close game.
Right.
It was just that one key moment.
Yeah, that was just the defining. Like, you look at the replay, and that was the defining moment that changed the whole game. That could have been like all over if they wasted the epicenter, they lose the Sand King, and you lose another tower after that. The whole game would have been just different.
Right. As you mentioned, that was that kind of prime timing moment for eHome. Now, it sounds like we do have a highlight coming up from Game 1 for eHome versus EG. And as we wait for that to come up, now, something we've discussed earlier is that if you're a weaker team, generally sometimes we've seen them like lose to a hero pick and say, all right, we just don't want to deal with that and ban that out right away. Do you think Sand King made a big enough impact that we might see eHome ban it?
In the second phase, I would say yes, because he did make a very big impact, and the fighting ability of EG that they got with just that one hero was quite insane, and they put it to work really brilliantly.
I think there are heroes that can substitute it. It's just you have to be aware of eHome's strategy before that happens. Like if you expect them to 5-man push a lot, you can go the Keeper to Light route that Secret likes. You can go like Ancient Apparition plus Sand King or Ancient Apparition plus someone else, which just halts pushes dead in this track, especially with heroes that heal up like Bloodseeker, Dazzle, Undying. I think that there are multiple ways to counter, but you have to see it coming. So it just depends on how early in the draft that eHome commits to this 5-man sweep your tower down map control strategy.
Okay, what about you, Winter?
I think it's mostly back again what I mentioned in the draft. They are using team fight composition against what eHome had, which is pushing. They want to group out and push, so that's generally a very good way of dealing with it. And it's just a matter of, I feel a lot of it is just unlucky this game. Honestly, they played as well as they could in the lanes, and everything went well. They hit the timing where they were pushing the tower, and they even know that the blink was there. So it was, for me, it was just very much unlucky, that game. It could have gone their way.
The split second of the
that
zombie.
Split second, just that one, that moment, it's just really, when you look at it, you're like, oh, you lost this game. You don't look at it. You don't feel too bad about that game, because sometimes it happens in Dota. You're just unlucky, and you just look forward to the next game. Like, I don't think the draft was that big of an issue, even though the Sand King was, I mean, it's good against a pushing lineup, but then again, there's a lot of replacements. There's Earthshaker, there's other heroes that fit into a fighting, like a team fight composition lineup, and teams have been using multiple heroes to deal with like pushing lineups. So I feel it's just more of eHome can look back at the game and feel we were just really unlucky at this moment, and sometimes luck determines the game.
Well, that is true. Yeah, overall, we also have another clip just showcasing again the importance of that Sand King and what a big role that he played, the Universe played in this matchup. But like you were mentioning, so it sounds like overall, I mean, you guys are pretty content with how eHome played that out. Do you think that eHome then goes forward, and even if it's not the same lineup, says, all right, let's still try this again because we can definitely make it work against EG?
I think they can. I mean, as Winter just said, split second change. If that is the only reason you lose the game, you can't just write off the strategy, because obviously split second you can change that. You can have like split second faster reaction perhaps. So in terms of trying the same strategy again, yeah, definitely.
What about you, Ben?
I mean, that's just one of those strategies that you can make very few mistakes. I wouldn't really call that a mistake, because they did prepare for it. It's just, it's not a very well-rounded strategy. You're heavily committed to the early game. You try to take over the map from there, and if it doesn't work, you have very little to fall back on with the Undying. I feel like EG is also very good about playing around the Tombstone. Like the last clip that we just showed, the fight was like, one screen away from the Tombstone, and they're also very good about playing around Sumail, the Sand King, taking out those heroes that really were lured by the low HP Sumail. Usually it's PPD there to save them, but this time it was Universe.
Yeah, and as we're seeing, I mean, both teams, they do seem to be still communicating quite well, even eHome, even if they're still sitting in their chairs a little bit beat, but still, not completely beaten down like, man, I can't believe we lost it that way. But they do seem to be reviewing and discussing what they can fix for Game 2. Hopefully we do seem to stand up a little bit. Overall, are you impressed with eHome? So far, they have tied all of their matches, and they tried to put up a really good fight against EG in Game 1. Could maybe take Game 2.
I've only watched a couple of their games. I think we watched the Empire versus eHome game, and I was actually pretty disappointed in them in that particular game, just because they had a very similar lineup, except they didn't really capitalize on it. They seemed very hesitant and when they had the stronger team fight in the stronger earlier game to actually force the issue. I feel like in this game it was a much better showing. I definitely think they can take a game off EG.
What about you, Winter?
Yeah, I think they definitely played much better today, and they definitely have what it takes to at least take one game away from EG if they actually strike the draft right and execution-wise right as well. I mean, I agree with Ben. The last game, the draft, even though it was alright, but they had very little room for error because it's a very one-dimensional type of draft. They had to do well in a timing window that the draft is good, which is the early to mid-game, and if they lose one fight towards the epicenter, then the whole game just crashes down from there, and they have to go back to farming, which is bad because they are splitting up, and it opens up the gank from the Storm and the Bounty Hunter. Whoever is alone just dies, to that.
I think EOM is one of those teams that, if it was a best-of-3 setting, they would probably have a good chance of taking the series. We saw that they've only taken 1-1 so far, at least mostly, and they mostly actually lose the first game and then win the second game. Mm-hmm. So this could be one of those scenarios where they learn from what they should do better and then take the second game. And if in the best-of-3 scenario, they could, of course, then also take the third game if they found the kryptonite of the team they're playing against.
That would be interesting to see, though, because EG also very well known to develop very well and mature throughout one series. Yeah. And, of course, PPD known to give a lot of advice on that, how to play out a series, how to change from game to game, how to not repeat the same mistakes. So, I mean, maybe if we get the chance later on in the tournament, that would be an interesting matchup to see which team learns a little bit faster, who gets the upper hand from game 1, game 2, and onward. Right now, we are waiting for game 2. Of course, both teams back in their places getting ready for the draft. Now, again, I mean, it's always interesting to watch EG's draft. Do you think they'll try anything different? That seems to be their go-to, right? Still try something new, try to throw the enemy on a little bit of a curveball. Maybe they'll show another little bit of a niche pick. What do you think, Ben?
I think they've dropped the first few games in their series, or if it's a 2-game series, they look weaker in the first one just because they need time to adapt to the team. These aren't all Western teams which they're usually playing against, and they dropped the first game versus Newbie, and I think they just need one game to feel the opponents out. How do their supports move? How often they tend to clump? Do they bait a lot? Do they counter gank a lot? What exactly is it? And I think last game, the Bounty Hunter pick could have been pretty useless if they hadn't stopped that one push. So I think they'll go probably for a different support other than the Bounty Hunter and just more team fight centric. So they aren't weak in that aspect. That was like a small weakness in their draft that E-Home could have won against.
I'm kind of curious because they eHome in this case put a lot of effort in shutting down Sumail in the first 10 minutes of the game, and I mean obviously he recovered quite brilliantly actually. But I'm curious to see if they're going to try to do it again, or if this time, for example, there is going to be a VPD and an AY sitting behind Sumail already ready, anticipating the gank that is going to come at around 3 to 4 minutes, which is what happened previous game.
Winter, would you expect that from EG? Just is that another way they could adapt here, or do you think they'll still try to take something?
Possibly, if you're PPD and you look at when the draft starts to take shape, you look at eHome supports. If you think that they might actually play very aggressive on towards Sumail's lane, then you can go back to one of your just defensive supports like Dazzle, Abaddon. We've talked about this before. He has such a huge hero pool in all those defensive supports, and you can just get early teleport score, so you just TP to his lane once he gets in trouble, or you just sit behind him. Either way, I don't think they are too phased by it because they are very used to dealing with pressure on Sumail, and even if Sumail falls behind, like Sin mentioned a couple of times, you focus Sumail, you let Universe and Fear loose, and they get more space. So it's either you have to choose who you want to shut down, and in a game, you can't just go into a mindset that we are going to shut down Sumail. You have to base on the lineup. What is the strength and what is the pillar of the lineup? Which hero is the key hero? And which hero would actually take shape and control the whole momentum of the game? Instead of just, okay, we are just going to shut down Sumail. And that's the plan.
Yeah, definitely not like that much of a one-dimensional team for EG. I can't help but think in that previous clip we just saw of eHome that they were looking at that moment at that tier 1 and mid and just saying, man, it was just a 1 second, maybe a split second difference there.
I mean, it happens, like you have to deal with it. Sometimes you're just off by that. You did everything right, but you don't achieve the acquired result that you want to.
It's kind of like the secret LGD, that Roshan fight. If it were 1 second...
Oh yeah, it's actually a very similar situation with the kinetic field, where the Earthshaker was waiting for the support to come in to place a sentry because he's very afraid that there's actually a ward spotting his movement, so he was really hesitant in moving in. just 0.2 seconds faster, the kinetic field comes in and he's going to be able to feel confident to jump in, but it didn't happen for them.
Yeah, so again, having the right idea versus execution, of course, and it's not always your fault. Sometimes just the game doesn't really play out in your favor, and that's all right. You move on to the next game. Going to game 2, are there any picks that perhaps we've been kind of missing from eHome that maybe they can now bring out if they really feel that it's do or die time to get this extra point?
Not particularly. I say it's not really that much on heroes. It's more just their general play style and how they want to approach their method of victory.
I don't think there's any particular hero. When you talk about eHome, the hero rings a bell, you know. I don't think there's any hero in general, but it's just mostly their play style, how they focus on helping CTY win his lane, and how their supports roam. And of course, Lamb as well on his position 4 support. Sometimes he delivers like great ultimates with his Earthshaker or his Sand King or whatever AoE supports that he has. So
yeah, of course they tend to some heroes like Razor very often, but as long as they have a mech carrier, which is
and of course basic. Our TK as well, we shouldn't forget him. Sometimes he wins the game for his team, and sometimes he doesn't do very well. There's no in between for him. So he's also another hidden factor that the team has, and he's the captain. So if he does well in his lane, he lands big spells, the morale of the team would be better in general.
I'm looking forward to seeing, hopefully, maybe this time DDC's Dazzle, also one of those heroes that he plays almost all the time and he really excels at. And it's been banned first phase, I think, previous game. So I think maybe the EG is going to do that again, but I'm kind of hoping that they won't.
Yeah, I mean, given EG's history of how they study up
probably
on their
opponents,
it does sound like there's a high chance that the ban will come through. But I mean, being hopeful for that, definitely. I mean, if it goes through, it could be a very exciting game. Overall, Dazzle showing up to really play and extend a lot of these games here at TI5. Definitely one of the heroes.
Not only extending though, you fight well, so you might actually finish the game early.
Well, true. It depends on who's